And now on the line is Linda Martin from Dublin Dog Hub. Linda, welcome to the FM.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Linda. Linda, I got in touch with you for this interview today, largely because I know there was a meeting held last week in Leinster House about puppy farms, which you attended.
That's right.
Before we talk about that meeting, can you tell me, Linda, a bit about how long you have loved dogs and a bit about the Dublin Dog Hub? Because I understand your organisation was only set up in the last couple of years, wasn't it?
It was. We're just open 2.5 years.
Okay. And you've loved dogs your whole life, have you?
Absolutely. We've always had dogs in our house. And I've grown up loving them. And I think I'm getting worse. I shouldn't be, but I just love the animals. And I love the fact that they're helpless. you know, if we don't look after them, what are the poor creatures going to do? But it's a big thing with me, yes.
And your centre is located in Finglas, is it?
Yeah, you may as well say Finglas, yeah, because we're near Meekstown Cottages.
Okay. It's interesting as well because Dogs Trust are located beside you as well, aren't they?
Well, they're not too far away, really, and I love them. Absolutely love them. I think they do fantastic work.
Okay, Linda, how do you think your organisation, Dublin Dogs Hub, has gone over the last couple of years?
Well, we opened up, and I have to add that I financed this whole thing myself, which is why if you check my bank account these days, you'll find that there's nothing in it. I have nothing left. But when Ashton Pound closed, and it had to close, there was nowhere for the dogs to go this side, the north side of Dublin. And I just thought, okay, put my money where my mouth is and just build somewhere. So I managed to get land. I applied for planning, did everything. It's a very slow process, as anybody who's done planning before will testify to. And once I got the planning, I got the luxury sheds. It sounds an awful thing to say a shed where you're putting dogs in, but these are insulated sheds, which are quite beautiful. They come from Faulkner's down in the Midlands. And we started off, applied to DCC for a licence. And since then, we've worked very, very well with Dublin City Council, and the wardens bring the dogs to us. And to date, 2.5 years later, we've rehomed over 530 dogs.
That's amazing, isn't it? Fair play to you. You're doing great work, you know.
It is amazing when you think about it, you know, but we're very proud of that. But I have a great team. I don't do all of this on my own, obviously, but the team are absolutely fantastic. And they do all the social media and things like that, you know, but we do our best. There's nothing too good for our dogs. We look after them really, really well.
Yeah, fair play to you. Excellent work. 500 dogs, that's amazing. Okay, Linda, we'll move on to the other topic. Can you tell me, Linda, what you thought of the meeting at Leinster House last week? And can you tell me if you think any good came out of it?
Okay, I've the highest respect for Chris Andrews, which is why I went along last week. And I'm glad I did, because I met an awful lot of people, like-minded people that I hadn't known before. But I totally agree with him with what he's trying to do, and that is have the puppy farms regulated. Now, people might say, there's regulation. Now, yes, there is regulations in place, but we don't have the manpower to actually put them into place. I mean, we're crying out for more guards. So you can imagine the trouble trying to get hold of extra inspectors and things like that. But really, the numbers of puppy farm dogs need to be brought down severely. In some cases, there's 300 dogs. And that could be a couple of times a year at least, depending on when the dogs come into heat, etc., etc. But we have to get those numbers down. I mean, to be called the puppy farm capital of Europe, that saddens me terribly. I mean, Ireland of the Céad Míle Fáilte, and suddenly that's the name we're being known at. I think it's really a disgrace on our country, our beautiful country, and I love Ireland so much. But that's what he's trying to do. So in other words, I totally agree with him. We had a very frank discussion. And I'm sort of limited. I mean, what can I do? I can voice an opinion. I can say to him that, yes, I agree with you, but it takes government to put these things into operation and really put them into operation, not just say, yeah, we go with that next week or something like that. That can't happen anymore. I really do think we must really enforce the regulations, because the people who run puppy farms, they are supposed to they are supposed to let everyone know how many dogs they have. And the sort of opinion is that they shouldn't have any more than about 30 breeding females. And those females should only be bred once a year, twice a year at the minimum, because we do have fantastic dog breeders. And I stress that because we had a friend of mine, what's his name? Mr. Healy Ray from Kerry, everybody knows him. And he was under the impression that we were saying there are no good breeders, and that's not true. So he came into the meeting anyway, and he contributed a lot. And we were able to inform him that there are amazing dog breeders in Ireland, amazing. But unfortunately, they're all sort of roped in with the puppy farmers. So we've got to do something. I mean, to be honest with you, if I could take you up to one of these puppy farms and you could see inside of it, these dogs don't get exercised. They wouldn't see a vet. It's just unbelievably pathetic. It's really cruel. And I totally disagree. So that's basically what the meeting was about. What stage it goes to now, well, that's up to Chris Andrews how he pursues it, but I should imagine it's going to be coming up in the Dáil at some sort of a vote. I don't know. It's difficult. You know, people think you can just walk in and these votes are taken and implemented within a short space of time. They are not. It's just if we had more money in this country to devote to animal welfare issues, well then that would certainly help.
I don't believe Chris Andrews has legislation put down on this issue yet anyway, but I understand that Jennifer Whitmore, the Social Democrat TD, has legislation that's getting debated in December, and somebody in your area told me, in the dog welfare area, that he believes that her legislation is great if it was passed. So you'd be a big supporter of that legislation, would you?
I really would. Anything that would help the situation with the puppy farmers. That's what I would be hoping for. And you know something? There's another thing, and I said last week, put revenue into them. You know, these are all cash deals, and where you and I pay a lot of tax. Everybody pays a lot of tax, but these puppy farmers, because it's all cash, they don't have to present receipts or anything. And the reality is that they're probably not being met. The people who are buying the puppies, they're not being met and shown the parents. They're not being shown the existing sheds where these dogs live. And the revenue would have the authority to get in, have a look, and then hopefully close down the ones that are appropriate.
And it's very unsustainable, I believe, because a lot, if not most of all of these dogs, I think, in these puppy farms, they become unhealthy, don't they?
They do. You see, you've got to realise that with no veterinary inspections on a very regular basis, you've got dogs, a mother, the pups grow up, and then the mother's breeding with a son, and then the son might be breeding with a sister. You know, so you've got those situations. And there's no way a dog can be healthy with that sort of breeding. Please don't buy from the puppy farms. People, I keep saying this to them, but please don't. There are so many dogs out there looking for homes. We have some of them, and they're delightful, delightful little creatures, big creatures even, because we rehome all shapes and sizes. But think about it. Don't go to puppy farms.
And now on the line is John O'Callaghan from Dog Advocacy Ireland. John, welcome back to Near FM.
How are you, Darren? Thank you so much for inviting me on to Near FM. It's a pleasure, always a pleasure.
All right, great. John, there was a meeting held in Leinster House last week on the issue of puppy farms. Can you give our listeners today on Near FM, John, a bit of a summary as to the background of the meeting and then tell them how the meeting went?
Yes, well, as your listeners may or may not be aware, Ireland is shamefully puppy farm capital of Europe. And what does that mean? It means that dogs are being kept in atrocious conditions by these unscrupulous dog breeders, whom I call puppy farmers, and I think rightfully so. And there's up to 200 million, yes, I repeat it, 200 million per annum being earned from this criminal mistreatment and abuse of dogs. It's a national scandal which must be addressed, and it's permitted to continue, without sanction. So it's way beyond time that our politicians address this national scandal, and it is a national scandal. Anything that's earning 200 million per annum by through criminality is a national scandal. So that's kind of the background to it, Darren.
Yeah, John, just before we talk about the meeting last week, I know there are obviously some good responsible dog breeders, but somebody told me that in a puppy farm stroke dog breeding establishment, you can have up to 300 dogs. Like, even if the dogs are getting treated okay in some of these places, 300 dogs in a location to breed puppies, that sounds a bit crazy to me, you know.
Well, it doesn't just sound crazy, it is crazy, Darren. And Ireland's biggest dog breeder, and he's a registered dog breeder. I'm not going to name him, but it's in the public domain, right? BBC Panorama did an award-winning documentary on dog breeding stroke puppy farming. I think it's as far back as 2018. And that featured Ireland's biggest puppy farmer or dog breeder, which is the one you're referring to with the 300 breeding females. And would you believe, to this day, Cavan County Council continues to issue this guy with a dog breeding establishment license. I mean, where would you get this? The BBC Panorama documentary, by the way, which was an award-winning documentary, went into this guy's property or kennels in the dead of night with an infrared camera, and the viewers of that documentary could see the conditions and the atrocious conditions and appalling conditions in which these dogs, breeding bitches and male dogs, and the puppies, of course, are being kept and are being imprisoned. And I'm not using dramatic language. That is the reality. If anybody cares to have a look at that BBC Panorama documentary, there's a link on Dog Advocacy Ireland's website, and maybe you might just include that, Darren, for your listeners. There's a link to that documentary, so anybody can view it if they so wish. So like that is just unacceptable. 300 breeding bitches on one site, and look, he's not alone. We're talking about other registered dog breeding establishments who have similar numbers, or certainly in the hundreds, and I've attended court hearings where three of these people, unfortunately, far too few of them are prosecuted and brought before the courts. But I've attended court hearings in the case of three others who were prosecuted and convicted, and the dogs, thankfully, were seized from these registered dog breeding establishments. So we need far more of that, because, regrettably, the authorities, and I mean governments and the Department of Agriculture and the various bodies who are responsible or supposedly responsible for the legislation on dog/animal welfare protection, the lack of enforcement is absolutely embarrassing. There are no inspections taking place in these registered dog breeding establishments, and I'm not even talking about backyard breeders. I mean, there are plenty of those. I'm talking specifically about registered dog breeding establishments, and this is what's happening. It is a national scandal.
I think there should be, I don't know if it's available already, but I think there should be some kind of a list telling people, like, in one spot where they all are, because, like, I don't. You said there's one in Cavan, but I'd love to know like where the big ones are in particular. You know.
Well, look, if again you can include it if you can. Dog Advocacy Ireland again on its website has that register of dog breeding establishments. So every registered dog breeding establishment is on that list, right? And it covers all the counties. So it's available to people, and I would advise them if they're thinking of getting a puppy. Well, first of all, I wouldn't advise them to be buying a puppy. But if they insist on buying a puppy, you know, they need to do their homework and they need to do their research. And one critical part of that research is they need to see the mother. You know, they need to go on site to see the mother of this cute puppy that they're intending to buy. I would discourage them from doing that. But like our dog pounds and rescue shelters are overflowing with dogs desperately seeking loving homes. You know, and there are 237 rescue shelters scattered all around the country, Darren. And as you know, like every local authority has at least one dog pound. You know, so they can source their puppy from those sources without buying a puppy.
Okay, John, can you tell me about the meeting last week in Esther House?
Yes, the meeting was facilitated by Senator Chris Andrews, and the people who presented were Dog Law Ireland, who are 3 young female solicitors who are obviously focused very much on the law surrounding dog breeding in particular. Dog Law Ireland, I think the name is a bit of a giveaway. So they presented, they were part of the presentation group. Another person was Linda Martin from Dublin Dog Hub Rescue Sanctuary. Linda made her presentation, and along with a lady called Alma, who's an ethical dog breeder. So Alma gave her very important insight into what it's like to breed dogs ethically and morally correctly. She's doing the job as it ought to be done. It's not a breed for greed culture, such as most of these dog breeding establishments. This lady is doing it for legitimate reasons, and she gave us a great insight into what is involved in the caring and the treatment of those dogs and those breeding females in particular and their puppies. So it was good to listen to Alma and to hear what's involved, you know, and when these puppies, you know, in dog breeding establishments, Darren, puppies don't get any petting or any love or any affection whatsoever. They're just ATM machines is what I call it, you know.
But would you accept that there are some dog breeding establishments who are respectable and they're responsible?
Absolutely, yes. And I can't tar everybody with the same brush. Yes, there are. And the Kennel Club would be a good source of those registered dog breeders who do it correctly, morally and ethically correct. And yes, you're correct in suggesting to me that I'm certainly not tarring everybody with the same brush, but regrettably, there are far too many who are unscrupulous dog breeders, and they are on that registered dog breeding establishment list.
We haven't got a lot of time left, John. I believe that Chris Andrews hasn't stated that he's going to put down new legislation, but Jennifer Whitmore, the Social Democrats TD, has put down legislation in the Dáil on this issue of puppy farms, and I believe that you are very supportive of this legislation, John. Do you believe that, do you, that Jennifer's legislation is the best way to regulate this area, do you, John?
Yes, I do, and I would maybe go slightly further. I was at Leinster House last December for Jennifer's launch of her dog breeding establishment amendment bill, which is obviously addresses the existing legislation, and that's why the word amendment is used in Jennifer's bill. Like she goes far deeper into the practice of dog breeding and what ought to happen. For example, Dog Advocacy Ireland, I'm not straying away from the question you've asked me. I definitely approve of Jennifer's bill and the many issues that are addressed in her bill. And that will be debated, by the way, in the Dáil on when they come back from their summer recess in September. And I would advise every one of your listeners to go and contact their constituency TD and ask them to support Jennifer's dog breeding establishment amendment bill, because that would go a long, long way to addressing Ireland's shameful scandal of puppy farm capital of Europe. Like, for example, Dog Advocacy Ireland was invited to a meeting by the Department of Agriculture in February, and that's because of Dog Advocacy Ireland's criticism of the department's indifference and disinterest in the existing legislation in relation to dog welfare protection and its enforcement. And we met with, well, 5 of them, but there were 2 senior significant figures in that Department of Agriculture section. And we met with them. The meeting lasted for 2 hours. And I believe that, without sounding arrogant or big-headed or anything else, I think that helped the current Minister Martin Hayden, to introduce or to publish his draft legislation in terms of dog breeding establishments stroke puppy farming. I genuinely believe that that's what influenced it, without sounding arrogant again. But the minister's draft legislation doesn't go nearly far enough. For example, he has no cap on the number of breeding bitches permitted, which is a complete failure and an omission on his part. But I'm sure this, given that Jennifer Whitmore's bill will be debated in Leinster House in September, I'm sure that the minister will be forced to introduce that absolutely essential cap on the number of breeding bitches permitted.
And now on the line is Jennifer Whitmore. Jennifer is the Social Democrats TD for Wicklow. Jennifer, welcome to New FM.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Jennifer, you have legislation put down in the Dáil that, if enacted, will regulate the area of puppy farms in Ireland. Can you tell me more? Can you tell me more about this, please, Jennifer?
Yeah, absolutely. So just before, in December last year, I brought a bill to the floor of the Dáil, essentially to regulate, as you say, puppy farms, to put a limit on the number of breeding females that can be on site, and also to bring in a whole lot of other regulations, restrictions around, the age at which puppies can be sold and the number of litters that a female can have. So, really just to strengthen the rules around puppy farm. What we have in this country is really there's not a huge amount of regulation when it comes to puppy farms. And as a result of that, we hear these horrific cases of whether it's issues of abuse or female dogs not being looked after when they're breeding, or indeed issues with pups that are being sold. And I think it's really important that we do have a much stronger regulation of this. I mean, puppy farming essentially it's an industrial scale level of producing pups for sale. And I think there needs to be a very strong focus and ensure that essentially that is cruelty free as much as possible.
Okay, I've spoken to 2 animal welfare activists in the last couple of days, and one of them told me that she believes that the government and Department of Agriculture should focus on implementing existing legislation, and the other animal welfare activist I spoke to told me that he believes that enacting your legislation is the way to finally regulate the puppy farm sector in Ireland. I haven't read your legislation yet, Jennifer, but you obviously believe that your new legislation is needed, do you?
Absolutely. So, look, I think I agree. I actually agree with both the people you were talking to, insofar as that any law is only as good as its enforcement, and I think we haven't really seen proper enforcement of the laws and regulations that are in place. But I also think that those laws and regulations need to be really strengthened. So, for example, at the moment, there is no legal requirement to have a certain number of staff on a site. So you could have over 300, like, you know, there are puppy farms in Ireland that have over 300 breeding female dogs on site. Like, literally you could have 1 or 2 staff members just managing all those dogs, all those pups, and be within the law. And that is not acceptable. So that's why I brought forward this legislation. It's to ensure that, you know, things like, you know, in my bill, you have to have 1 staff member for every 10 breeding females. And we have a cap on the number of breeding females that you can have of 30. At the moment, you can have over, as I said, 300. You know, they're essentially farms for dogs. And I just don't think that's really what we want to have. I mean, they're really just pumping out pups. And I think the governance and the welfare of those sites are in question. So this, I think the legislation that I brought forward last year, and I'll be bringing it to be coming back for debate in September. The important thing of that legislation is actually that it puts a cap on the number of dogs that can be bred on any site, and I think that's a really big gap in the current laws at the moment.
And the Gardaí need the training as well, don't they, Jennifer, to be able to implement the law on animal welfare, don't they?
Yeah. Well, so I think what you would have is wardens and vets, you know, that are under, you know, that would work for the local authorities, or indeed some instances in the Department of Agriculture. And I think, like, they're just not resourced enough to deal with these in many instances, you know. So, but as well as that, I do think that the legislation needs to be strengthened so that they have the teeth, so that they can actually you know, deal with these issues a lot easier if they come across welfare issues. So I think, look at it, it's an area that hasn't had a lot of focus from a government level. There have been calls, like, I mean, the public, this is an area the public really want the government to do something on, because the public recognise they see on a regular basis the welfare issues that are happening as a result of these, you know, these large scale puppy farms. And I think, you know, many people would engage with their local puppy rescues, their dog rescues, and they know that these volunteers put a huge amount of time and effort and love and passion into rescuing dogs and taking them away from, you know, horrendous situations and trying to find them loving homes. But really, we shouldn't be a country where that kind of you know, that support is required, or that we need as many rescues as we do. So it's definitely something that the public want to see happen, but we need the government to actually act on it.
Okay, there are many responsible dog breeders in Ireland. Are you concerned, Jennifer, that responsible dog breeders are getting roped into the perception the public have of irresponsible puppy farm owners?
No, look, I think it's really important, and I agree. There are many responsible dog owners, and I hope I've actually put a call out to, you know, those owners, those breeders, because I'd love to visit their sites and to see how they manage it. But I you know, there is definitely responsible dog breeders in the country, but I think in the first instance we do need to tackle those ones where there isn't a huge amount of transparency for the public as to what happens on these sites, and as I said, the level of enforcement and control and governance isn't there either. So I think it is really important that we do tackle those problematic ones. But as you said, there are, you know, as with anything, there's always, you know, good ones and bad ones. And I think that if we manage to tackle the bad ones, well, then the good ones will sort of shine through, and people will realise and know what makes a good one, and the ones to avoid.